Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is One of One, but you can call me Seven. And we just completed truly a goated chapter in Witch on the Holy Night. And now I'm just sort of left wondering how we're gonna pick up the pieces. Cause Aoko has Shizuki in a little bottle, literally in a little magical bottle, because she definitely was not going to carry him. And Alice is gone off somewhere, presumably angry after Flat Snark was sent to oblivion. So, where does the story move from here? Like, what are the character interactions going to be like? The character dynamics? And how does the plot unfold now that this is sort of all resolved, I guess? Because Aoko still seems like she's gonna be, like, talking amicably to Alice. That's sort of the implication that I got. So I don't know, we'll have to see what happens next. Let's get going. So the next chapter is called Like a Dog, which I can only assume is in reference to Shizuki? So, I don't know, because he's so earnest and innocent? I'm not sure, but we now know that they sort of like each other. I don't know. He got confused when they had their whole confession moment at the end of last chapter. Anyway, chapter 6, Like a Dog. It was still in a deep sleep. In the bottle? Oh? This is music we haven't heard before, I don't think. It all seemed ablaze in a mad, fiery red. Unbearable idle thoughts, incessant obstinacy. Melancholy sights and gloomy, bittersweet talk. Fickle wickedness born of human interaction. Namely, the voice of a forsaken coexistence. This, however, was the scenery of a world far removed from that. If there were those praying this was paradise. Oh, if there were those praying this was paradise, then there were likely also those lamenting it as the underworld. In a decade, or perhaps longer, this would all change. But for now, the autumn leaves remained yet untrampled by human souls. It was scenery he knew well. Life in the mountains was humble and modest. There were no conspicuous buildings among this wilderness he called home. They gathered and stockpiled only what they needed to survive without pillaging the land. Serpentine trails could be seen woven through the fields, and the stone steps leading to the summit were obscured by the forest, only visible once upon them. The mountain inhabitants probably intended it that way. There was no sign of mankind's exploitation among the mountain landscape. He suddenly remembered that this was the season he liked the most. Good taste. Or rather, it suited him the most. There was much to be done to prepare for winter, but whenever he had a free moment, he would make his way toward the mountaintop. Gazing idly at the setting sun while breathing deep, the crisp autumn air was probably the second favorite of his daily joys. And his first? It relaxed him, the cold but comforting wind at dusk. Me too, man. I feel that. And the way the sunset dyed the peaks a vibrant crimson. Not 2 months had passed since coming down from the mountains, and already it pained him that the memories had begun to fade. Someone once told him that memories fade every day, so the best you can do is make as many new ones as possible. Recollections grow hazy. A new place to live meant the beginning of a new life. He wasn't sure if he was reluctant to let go of the scenery he'd cherished for so long, or if he'd merely been spoiled by it. Despite his new home in a city surrounded by tall buildings, he felt guilty for wanting those memories alone to remain clear in his mind. Either way, he had to make the best of a fresh start. What kind of man thinks more about where he came from than where he's going? He contemplated. Oh, this is a dream. He tried to stop himself from indulging in uncharacteristic sentimentality. It wouldn't be a dream if it was easy to understand. The moment he realized he was dreaming, angular shadows began to rise from the autumn colors. They were concrete buildings, previously unknown and yet familiar to him at the same time. This was how his current life was washing away his memories. Struggle as he might, there was no stopping the degradation of human memory or impressions. It was merely a fact of life. By nature, humans lived in the present over the past. Eventually, even his most cherished memories would be swallowed up by the buildings. It was neither cruel nor heartless. If they were sure to disappear, then for now he would content himself with dreaming about the memories he could clearly recall. Whether in the mountains or the city, the days flew by. Yesterday's scenery was not the same as today's. Oh, and such. She had given him no time to grieve. Distant nostalgia was beautiful, but that made it fleeting. Miyagi Nyudo? You're no me. I don't know what that means, Aozaki. I can't talk my way past you. A faint dizziness made him close his eyes. Without sight, the mountainous landscape vanished, but in its place, a familiar voice could be heard. It was a booming voice that seemed to shake not only the mountainside he stood upon, but the entire mountain as well. And of course, Aoko Aozaki reappeared, towering in the distance. He must have been tired, he thought, diagnosing himself while trying to make out what she was saying. Fearing the vertigo would return if he reopened his eyes, he decided to keep them closed. It sounded like she was arguing with someone, though the tone was all he could make out. It wasn't violent, but certainly aggressive. Maybe she was picking a fight with another mountain across the way. He wouldn't put it past her. After all, she was a troublemaker who blew up the moon. He couldn't quite grasp the conversation, though somehow vaguely he had the sense that his human rights were being largely ignored. It was deeply unsettling, even for a dream. After several minutes, it seemed that the high-impact argument ended in Aoko's victory. Then suddenly, the boisterous voice faded. Praying everything would be back to normal, he opened his eyes. Oh? Oh? Is this the park? Oh no, we're back at Kitsyland. He took a deep, slow breath. The scenery was a far cry from the nostalgic dreamscape he had just left, albeit not unpleasant either. Without a doubt, it was the amusement park. To him, his was his freshest memory. He recalled the house of mirrors that Aoko Aozaki destroyed. This park was a flawless replica of reality, but he was the only one there. Without having to worry about anyone chasing him, he sat down on the wreckage of Kitsy's rides and looked up at the moon that should have been shot down. So a full normal-looking moon, the winter moon shone white like a jewel. It was layered over the figure of the girl who tried to kill him. If a mage was a witch, then she definitely fit the bill. I don't mind being killed. Such an absurd thing to say, but it spilled out of him so naturally. Well, maybe. That had nothing to do with witches or magecraft. There was an echo in the gaps of his heart. If she had not spoken those words, then he would not have responded as he did. In that moment, what had Aoko Aozaki said to him? As he tried to remember, his deep slumber drew to an end, and with it, his chance to find the answers he so wished he could find. Wakey, wakey, buddy. In the, Konji estate, I think, maybe. Then, Sojiro woke up in an unfamiliar room, gasping. Not because the plush mattress he was on was softer than his apartment's cheap futon, or because everything from the carpet to the wallpaper looked expensive. Is it Alice? Yeah. Bewildered, he tried to catch his breath. She was the cause of his surprise. The moment Sojiro's eyes snapped open, there she was. Girl dressed in black, sitting at his bedside. The silence was deafening. Still supine on the bed, Sojiro gazed at her. His impulse was to sit up, but he refrained, thinking it might be rude to be staring at the person sitting next to him. She was just sitting there on a chair, dressed in black, modest clothes. Still, she projected an air that was anything but plain. Her monochrome outfit evoked indescribable elegance, like a costume handmade just for her from the finest fabrics. It was enough to inspire poetic sentiments even in Sojiro. The girl continued to sit, completely motionless. Without realizing it, Sojiro had stopped breathing. Genuine astonishment had him captivated. Such beauty. It was the first time he had ever thought to use such a simple, plain expression to describe another human being. She was the daffodil, in perfect bloom. Or the ideal female form, seen only in dreams. This quality was something to be cherished and admired in her. It was different from Aoko Aozaki's blindingly radiant vitality. After all, the flame that burns twice as bright burns half as long, and there was no way this girl would be allowed such a happy ending. Her life was a solitary fable of someone who left the world in exactly the same way they entered it. With her humanity stolen at birth, hers was an existence not of this world. The more beautiful something was, the more tragic its fate. Growing up in the mountains, this was not something Sojiro was taught, but something he learned from experience. It looks like she's sleeping. Sojiro turned his head as though he was being lured in. He knew it was rude to stare, but he couldn't fight his instincts. Then... Oh. Huh? This time, his heart actually skipped a beat. She was not asleep at all. Expressionless, she was merely watching over him while he recovered. Sojiro froze, unable to turn his head away or think of something clever to say. It was like staring into her eyes turned him to stone. Perhaps because of her delicate features, she looked somewhat younger than him. On the other hand, her tranquil expression made him feel like she was older. Jet black hair just to her shoulders. Her large eyes were set like onyx stones, matching her hair. Devoid of emotion, her gaze stayed fixed on Sojiro. Even after their eyes met, she did not turn away. He wanted to speak, but could not find the words. It was not unlike a frog being stared down by a snake. Nevertheless, he just could not bring himself to say something. Additionally, what have you got, buddy? No matter how carefree Sojiro might have been, he was painfully aware that this girl was as powerful as Aoko. Less talkative, to be sure, but still powerful. Objectively, the scene was not unlike that of someone nursing a bedridden stranger. He had no idea what she may have been thinking about, but it seemed to him this harsh silence might last forever. All he could say for sure was that the quiet did not appear to bother her in the slightest. It was like some bizarre form of punishment. If this is some kind of test from Elzaki, it sure is elaborate, he thought, keeping his eyes on the girl. He felt like the moment he turned his head or blinked, she might stab him in the chest with a hidden blade, and not because his imagination was running away with him. In the stifling silence, it was only natural that Sojiro would think back on what had happened in the amusement park, and it made him uneasy. But stronger than any anxiety was his fascination with the girl. Her slender frame and milky white skin, the chill of her guarded stare, the warmth of her lingering femininity. It was the mixture of those two latter qualities that was almost magical. He stared at her for so long, he began to get the feeling that they had met somewhere before. Sometime before the conflict at Kitsyland. He could not quite put his finger on it, but he was sure he had seen her previously. I don't know if this is the right time to ask this, but his voice shattered the frozen silence in the room. He almost felt sorry for making noise as he spoke out to her. They could not very well just sit and stare at each other forever, though he might have been the only one thinking they were staring, and perhaps she thought they were glaring at each other. Where am I, and who might you be? She narrowed her eyes slightly, though apparently not out of offense. There was no response. Just as he was thinking it would have been better to keep quiet, she quietly raised her hand. This is yours, is it not? Her voice was cold but melodic. A white piece of cloth was wrapped in her fingers. There was no need to tell him what it was. He was conscious enough to recognize his own possessions. Sojiro sat speechless as she tossed it to him. Picking it up, he wrapped it around his neck. Oh! I completely forgot about that. Oh. Okay. Does Aoko know about that? He looked away in response to her blunt question, distracted by something unrelated. She called Aoko Ozaki by her given name, which led him to believe that the mountain Aoko had argued with... that the mountain Aoko had argued with in his dream was actually the girl beside him. There we go. I'm not sure. As sincerely as he could, he answered without presumption. There are things that should be known and things that need not be. There are also things that should be told and other things that must not be. Sojiro was not exactly sure what that she was referring to, however, maybe it's better that way. He smiled slightly at her question. Perhaps impressed by his response, the overwhelming pressure in the room dissipated noticeably. Or maybe she had been more nervous than he was the entire time, projecting the image that his room was her domain a tad too strongly. The tension faded. Sojiro tried to sit up and prop his arms beneath him. Now that they were talking, it seemed awkward to stay lying down. However, his body felt strange as he tried to move, and it surprised him how difficult it was to sit up. It took everything he had just to raise his upper body to a sitting position. I'm still in my clothes. As he threw the covers back, he tilted his head quizzically. I'm sorry. This is such a nice bed, too. I shouldn't be in my clothes under the sheets. What a waste of a good bed. She stared at him, not expecting him to complain about not wearing pajamas while sleeping. Somehow, it appeared that he had done something to surprise her. But why? I didn't do anything, the name of the game for this guy. I didn't do shit. What do you mean? Pouting a bit at the unwarranted curiosity, he turned to face her. Although he was still mostly laying down, it was at least a more dignified position. So, any chance you'll tell me? Indeed, he needed to find out where he was and who she was before anything else. Actually, the more he thought about what had happened at the amusement park, the more he got a sinking feeling in his stomach. Perhaps finally getting through to her, she calmly moved her arm from behind her back when... Here we go. Once again, they silently locked eyes. Thump, 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 thump. There was a startling sound of rapidly approaching footsteps. They both had a pretty good idea of who it was. Hi, Aoko. Alice, you promised! Just as expected, Aoko Ozaki burst through the door with a thunderous roar. You promised you'd tell me when you woke up. She entered wearing her school uniform, her long hair flowing behind her. Her breathing was heavy, and her forehead was wrinkled by a scowl, granting her a demonic appearance. This girl named Alice scowled slightly in response. She may have even let out a sigh of disappointment slip out. Aoko, home early, I see. Her calm voice was the polar opposite of Aoko's. Needless to say, her voice dripped with a brazen coldness. That's because I know you all too well. Over the past 2 years, I've come to expect how quickly you jump to conclusions. You might act mild-mannered, but as soon as things don't go your way, the veil drops. Oh dear, you make it sound so scandalous. Effortlessly, she brushed aside Aoko's jab. In doing so, Sojiro had the distinct impression that she no longer even realized he was in the room. Let the records show that I've lost count of how many times you've gone back on your word. I'm tired of hearing the same old story after the fact. I know I said I would leave it to you, but after careful consideration, I decided to take care of it myself. I may have come to terms with your short fuse, but the least you can do in return is to trust your partner to set things right, no? You're right. We wouldn't be partners otherwise. Though you're hardly one to talk after unilaterally deciding our plan from here on out. We've been over this already. We won, okay? Besides, who was the one who said we should let him live if he escaped? Yet again, you've gone back on your word, Alice. Oh, don't tell me. Next you'll be saying that's the reason you can't let sleeping dogs lie. Alice frowned slightly and fell silent. Her housemate seemed to have struck a nerve that Alice herself did not know was there. Anyway, we agreed to decide what to do with him when he wakes up after hearing him out, right? So stop trying to flip the script every time my back's turned. Speaking of which, aren't you supposed to be at school? It's noon already. I remembered you only had your school's end-of-term ceremony today, so I told them I had to leave early for personal reasons. This is so warped. I have finals coming up, for goodness sake. Aoko grumbled more to herself than anyone else in the room. Then she locked eyes with Alice, or more accurately, they glared daggers at each other. The room had become tense once again, and it felt like a fight could break out at any moment. With no way to escape, Sojiro had no choice but to sit and watch. But then, the electric silence that seemed like it would last forever suddenly broke about a minute later. Apparently, this sort of clash was an everyday occurrence. I'll be in the drawing room. Explain the circumstances to him. Alice stood up from the chair and made for the door. Watching her go, Sojiro cocked his head. In her hand was what could only be described as a fruit knife? Yet no other words to describe the tool she was clutching. I hate to ask, but what's in your hand? Aoko asked Alice as she walked past. A dagger. What else? Alice answered expressionlessly before briskly walking out of the room. Sojiro thought it best not to think too deeply about the scene he had just witnessed. Me too, man. I'm with you on that one. I'm learning to go along with the ride on this one, you know? You know what I'm saying? Kind of gotta just sort of put my head down and say, yeah, this is happening, sure. At any rate, the girl in black had withdrawn, and along with her the feeling of tension, leaving a bedridden Sojiro alone with an Aoko still dressed for school. From Sojiro's perspective, this was a perfect chance to get answers to his ever-growing list of questions. My head's spinning, Aozaki. I bet. I'll explain everything in order, so just shut up and listen. Here we go. It's for us as well as him. I see the facial paralysis is gone and your breathing is stabilized. It looks like you're through the worst of it. She nodded, satisfied as she took a seat. How do you feel? A bit sluggish, he answered meekly, dropping his shoulders. He opened and closed his left hand a few times, but moving his fingers felt slow and awkward. It was clear that he was still in bad shape. Meanwhile, Aoko was blinking her eyes in wonder, or was it admiration? Between Alice and Aoko, Sojiro did not know which of the girls was the hardest to read. Well, you're bound to feel a bit sluggish. Lying in bed for 2 days straight would make anyone feel weak. But I never thought you would be well enough to speak. You're a lot tougher than you look. 2 days? It's been 2 days. Don't worry about the school. I submitted a notice of absence. In the meantime, Alice and I dispelled the Gander curse and Dumpty poem. Sojiro nodded at the word curse as if recalling it suddenly. It was all coming back to him now. What's wrong? You look troubled by something. I just forgot everything that really happened is all. Was I really asleep for 2 days? Getting cursed is pretty scary. You're as cool as a cucumber, aren't you? It's as if 2 days on death's door hasn't changed you a bit. Do you realize you were one step away from becoming a vegetable for the rest of your life? Shut up a minute. Was it really that bad? It was, and I guess you're proof that ignorance is bliss after all. Anyway, what's done is done. Be sure to thank Alice later. I couldn't have lifted the curses without her help. Sometimes bliss is overrated. Oh, and yeah, you said the name Alice. Was that girl Alice? Was she the one who, tried to kill us at the amusement park? Aoko replied that it was. She was sitting by my side for ages. Is this her room or something? Sojiro scanned the room again. He was not accustomed to sleeping on anything other than a futon, and the room looked especially foreign to him. No, this is just a guest room. It hasn't been used in forever, hence the dust over everything. More importantly, what did you and Alice talk about? Well, we didn't really talk so much as... He brought his hand to his mouth and recalled the few words they exchanged. Sojiro said calling it a conversation would be a gross overstatement, and yet thinking back on it, it seemed like they had talked for hours, which brought an uncomfortable smile to his face. That's fine. I'm no longer worried. Although, it would have been nice if you had come a little later, Alzaki. Aqua narrowed her eyes at his innocent slip of the tongue. She knew Sojiro did not mean to treat her like a nuisance, but nevertheless she found it hard to take the full brunt of the words said to her face. Even worse, she sensed she was getting used to his manner of speaking, which is even worse. You're gonna start saying stuff to other people in public, and they're gonna look at you, and you're gonna go, "What? My friend does it." So that's why she... You really do have a knack for surviving by the skin of your teeth, don't you? He tilted his head, clearly confused. I'm saying you did something to please Alice. That's the reason you're still alive. Uh-huh? The question, dude, they might as well be showing above his head at this point with all the shit he's had to sort of just accept and go, yeah, okay, that's a thing that happens. No matter how hard he tried, he could not grasp what she was getting at. He decided to change the subject to something else. By the way, where are we exactly? I asked the other girl, but she wouldn't tell me. You can tell me, right, Ozaki? Misaki's infamous haunted house, but you can call it the Koanji estate. Alright. I think from this point forward, because I'm realizing that there's so much like text in this game, and to save myself just a little bit, I might start summarizing sentences if that's okay. Just so you guys know, and if you guys want me to, I mean, I'll go back. I will read important things out loud, don't worry. Anyway, yes, so it's Alice Koanji. This is her mansion. We got brought here, Shizuki. You don't remember, do you? Something about the way she said that made him feel uncomfortable. I know some old guys in the shopping district were talking about it. The Koanjis are a rich and famous family or something. Don't say that in front of Alice. Okay. Tilted his head. For once, he is like a dog. 100 times that day, and once again, he had heard something to make him feel uneasy. Did you just say... I have very little patience for liars, idiots, and people that make me repeat myself. Do your best to remember that if you want to enjoy your stay here. God, it's so menacing. Look at her face. Look at her. With her best smile, Aoko made her threatening proclamation. Yeah, I caught him off guard. I must have misheard you. Something about me living here. He shot her an honest stare of disapproval. It was the best resistance he could muster, but it was not in the slightest effective against Aoko's overpowering, ruthless glare. The quicker you understand the position you're in, the better it'll be for you. So, yeah, he wanted to express his feelings, but instead swallowed his words and shook his head. Despite his typical inability to read people's emotions, he at least seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. It appeared that he had finally realized that it was his carefree mood that typically got on Aoko's nerves. Hey, good job, man, after a couple days now. Couple episodes. No use beating around the bush with you. I want to give you time to think, but we're way past that. So I'm gonna come out and say it. As of now, you're being placed under our supervision. You will be living here together with us for the time being. Yo, let's go. We're gaming. This is, elaborate Riz, we'll call it, folks, okay? Just putting the idea out there, you know? Naturally, I reserve the right to decide whether you live or die. What? The blatant tyranny in her voice caused him to sputter. He wished that she would stop smiling in an attempt to make it seem any less outrageous. Live together with you? It was not the faint expectation of living under the same roof with Aoko that had him flustered. Rather, he was genuinely concerned about his own safety, which at this point, guys, I don't think we can, you know, we can fault him for that. I think that's a pretty fair thing to be thinking about. Regardless of how good-natured he was, it seemed he finally had come to grips with the fact that he had just escaped death, like for real, like as a teenager. God. Seeking warmth next to a bear before it goes into hibernation. Aoko agreed, as a blunt a comparison as it was. Pretty accurate metaphors, you know, but I'm glad you figured it out. Make a wrong move or break a rule, and it'll end you for real this time. God, look at her. It's just me and Alice. She has way less common sense than I do, so if you're not careful, you'll wind up dead by her hands too. Oh, poor guy, look at him. Look at him. Oh, not Mr. Negative. There's sincerity that made it believable. No. Obviously, there's no way the victim Sojiro could accept these terms. You're not making any sense. I'm under your supervision, but why is that necessary? I haven't even done anything wrong. There's no point. This has to be a misunderstanding. Are all mages like you? Arrogant and selfish were the words that the harmless boy's gaze seemed to look at him. How can you say it? Look at his face. Aoko felt a headache coming on. Due to his innate easygoing persona, Sojiro had not thought to question that Aoko being a mage was out of the ordinary. Dakara. That's the problem. We need to keep an eye on you so you don't go around saying things like that and blow her cover, you dunce. Aoko flew out of her chair. She'd been doing her best to keep her cool, but it seemed her well of patience had finally run dry. Witnessing Aoko snap, Sojiro clapped his hands together. Boom. Oh, now I get it. The reason you tried to kill me was because you have to hide the fact that you're a mage. Oh, he connects the dots, guys. He's so smart. Look at him. Look at that face. Look at that face. No thoughts behind those black eyes. If that's the case, then I get it. You're monitoring me to protect your secret, and not taking my life is your way of throwing me a bone. I mean, those aren't the words I would use, but sure, it sounds a bit harsh when you... No, but that's exactly what's happening. You can't complain about him describing it that way. I have school and work to go to, can't stay locked up all day. In an instant, Sojiro's objectivity had her stumped, leaving her at a loss for it. Dude, he just immediately just... On to the next thing. Well, alright, if I'm staying here, I mean, you have to understand, this is like really silly. Like, I can't stay here for that long, because like, I got shit to do. To believe that he had any sort of freedom at this point was shocking, to say the least. Just breathe, Aoko. If anything, this will speed things along. Aoko somehow managed to compose herself. As a matter of fact, she never had any intention of imprisoning him. Stripping him of his freedom and incarcerating him would go against their agreement anyway. Besides, if she was going to go that far, it'd be easier to just kill him. To Aoko, letting him live meant showing a modicum of respect to Sojiro's way of life. Wait, don't tell me I can't even leave this room? A light bulb went on in his head as he blurted out what he was thinking. It appeared he had finally got the grim message. Oh. Locking you up would actually be more trouble. Your freedom was taken into consideration. To what degree you are free will be left to the discretion of Alice and her abilities, so you won't have to worry about that. Oh, poor guy. His concern growing by the second. Sparing your life is based on the premise that you will live in this house under supervision. That's only until a more permanent solution is found. A lot more amicable than just disposing of the witness, don't you think? At any rate, this is my way of keeping our promise to no complaining. This Cold War I'm waging with Alice is enough of a headache already. She sighed as she stared Sojiro down as he lay on the bed. Make no mistake, your status here is the lowest of the low, even lower than a dog's. Oh, there we go, like a dog. Since that night, I'm the one to decide whether you live or die, which means you belong to me now. This has become immediately such a skewed relationship, Jesus Christ. Is that clear enough to you? As Aoko finished her declaration, Sojiro subtly looked up at the ceiling so she would not notice his reaction. He meant no offense to Aoko, but he had to hide the fact that he fundamentally disagreed with her analogy. In Sojiro's opinion, it was disrespectful to both dogs and humans to call him lower than a dog. A more accurate analogy of their power dynamic would be that of a rabbit and a wild boar, hence why he chose not to voice his opinion. Oh my god, the semantics for this guy. Unlike his apartment, the ceiling here was decorated with ornate patterns. Putting aside how he would be treated here in terms of lodging, it was a definite upgrade. Maybe it would not be all that bad. Sojiro nodded slowly as if to persuade himself. And... I've decided to let you live. That is what she had told him not 2 days ago. Well, I don't really accept what you're saying. I understand my position. I remember what you promised me now. There are lots of things I could disagree with, but I admit you did promise me at least that. Are you really serious about me living with the two of you? I know you're pretty easygoing, but that girl seems pretty against it, and I'm not exactly... At that point, he zipped his lips. Aoko's eyes were tinged with bloodlust. Oh, please excuse me. I'm sorry to hear that you're dissatisfied with the arrangement. Her contrived smile so obviously forced struck despair into Sojiro's heart. He vaguely recalled her warning to him to not make her repeat herself. Furthermore, Sojiro Shizuku's life was now in the hands of Aoko Ozaki. It would be unwise to anger her further, he told himself as if speaking to a third person. What choice do I have anyway? None. Sojiro slumped with his shoulders in surrender. I understand you now. Do I have any human rights? Poor little Shizuki. You never had any in the first place. Now stop wasting my time with stupid questions. The relationship is so screwed up now. Dang it. Sojiro reflected upon her answer, now feeling like his question was, indeed, stupid. He should have already known the answer before he asked. That's what I thought. I had a feeling this was going to happen even before waking up. His muttering provoked a dubious stare from Aoko before she quickly retracted it. If she questioned every little thing he said, they would be there until sundown. As long as you understand, move to the drawing room, ton of explaining to do. Can you stand? Okay, so we're walking, we're going, seen this side of her many times before. Or this bold form of hers anyway. Memories flash back to him like lightning. I remember now. This is the Aozaki I know. Without knowing it, he cracked a smile. He was so lost that he did not know his left from his right, but recalling this alone was enough to calm him. The Aoko he knew was different from the one in the House of Mirrors. She was not that brooding girl he saw there. He felt a pang of nostalgia. The Aoko he knew was brisk in movement and unfaltering in gaze, just like this one. She was the same as when he first met her, moody yet overflowing with confidence. In her element, in a phrase. Alright, chop chop. Alice is waiting for us out into the corridor. You must not know what it's like to be bedridden, Aozaki. You're making noises while he's getting up already. Heavy and stiff, cried out in pain as he tried to stand and walk, shooting pains through his bones. Calm face to walk towards her. Typically, he was quick to not pay any mind to his life's little struggles, but these pains... He needed to force himself to consciously ignore them. In other words, he was displaying false bravado, an uncharacteristic reaction for someone who never suppressed their true feelings. You really are tough, huh? Thanks. It's just my heart that's fragile. I'll keep that in mind and try not to hurt your precious feelings. Devoid of any true empathy, she turned away. Oh, and just then she stopped, feet snapped together as though something had popped into her head. And just as if she was remembering something she had forgotten in a completely trivial way. Follow me, Sojiro. She gallantly turned back the way she was heading, the words sounding so natural as she spoke them. Aoko did not see the look in Sojiro's eyes as he heard her words, for though she worked in the arcane, the spell Aoko had woven was apparent to everyone but her. After blinking his eyes as if blinded by something, Sojiro casually nodded and followed behind her. Alright, we've got setup. Contained more rooms than Sojiro's entire apartment and building, except their size was excessive. Seemed too numerous for so few inhabitants, its lavish carpeted halls cold and dreary. Oh god, so much stuff. So much description, guys. This is all the time that we have for today. A nice little setup for this chapter, just to see what our circumstances are now for Shizuki and what the relationship is going to look like. So, I'm curious. They're so goofy. They're just simply so goofy. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I definitely did. And I will see you guys in the next video. So for now, have a good rest of your day. And I will see you soon. Bye.